Alright, hey there, people of the internet. Gonna talk about a topic that's not necessarily entirely video game related, but I think is one that's honestly relevant to the contents of my channel and the contents of things that I like to talk about, and that is the implications of AI or artificial intelligence on just various forms of media that we consume, video games, anime, books, and the kind of scary implications it has for the future of just the humanities and the arts in general. Why am I bringing this up on this YouTube channel that talks about video games? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of the primary ones is that a lot of the games that we discuss in this channel actually have to do a lot with this topic. Video games that talk about, artificial intelligence usurping the original goals and intents of its creators and developing its own kind of self-awareness and consciousness on its own, and almost kind of like defying the existence it was created with and creating its own form of humanity or mock humanity. That's something that kind of happens very often, right? In works of science fiction, in a lot of games, in a lot of anime, in a lot of books, and movies in general too. Something that's a very common theme, but I'm starting to think that we're reaching a turning point in society right now with the advancements of things like, Chat GPT, the Elven Labs thing that lets you literally take 2-minute audio clips of someone and then turn it into like any sort of text-to-speech audio recording of someone that sounds legitimately convincing. And then even beyond that, there's anime that has been coming out that's been completely AI generated. AI generated illustrations and art has reached a level of uncanny valley, almost hyper-realism. Beyond that too, you have things, as I mentioned, like ChatGPT writing entire scripts. You have AI that's able to write entire pieces of fiction, albeit it's not perfect, but it does start to feel more and more human as the days go on, and that's a bit scary. Beyond that too, we have even smaller things that artificial intelligence has been creeping its way into our lives and just helping us in general. There are apps that are being sold to us that are used to fix our grammatical mistakes. Our phones even nowadays, they can fix our grammatical mistakes down to the punctuation even, and it's kind of crazy that we're getting to this point. A lot of critical thought and media literacy is being handed to robots. They're doing the jobs that we need to do for us. The problem is, and I think this extends to pretty much all of discussion around this when it comes to multiple different professions, is that this technology at some point, the intent is clear now. They're getting closer and closer to mimicking human speech, to mimicking human behavior, being able to replicate and create ideas that were once thought to be purely human, and they're doing it with robots. In a society that we live in now, in a world that we live in now, where everything is commodified for us, everything is being sold to us as a product, as an idea, these companies, people with money and power who have access to all of these tools already, are going to use them to cut out the middleman. They're going to start feeding us AI generated stories, AI generated illustrations and art, AI generated music, AI generated video game concepts, coding, software, things like that. And it's kind of scary to think of, the idea that the humanities, the things that we once thought were exclusively human in nature and that were created with the intent of one human sharing stories to other humans, is going to be stripped of the thing that made it special. Beyond that, it's reshaping the entire landscape of how we understand the world in a lot of ways, right? We have technology that exists that can just fix our grammar on a whim. Well, then a lot of teachers are going to be out of jobs. If we have technology that exists that can do math problems for us just right away without us having to think about it, then a lot of people are going to be out of jobs. People who create these softwares even are going to be out of jobs. And it's honestly just mainly terrifying because regardless of if we like it initially or not, just like the Overton window shifted with the idea of microtransactions or the battle pass or games as service or, minor or rapid inflation in prices of things, we can complain about it and maybe the backlash will be so bad that initially they won't do anything and it buys us a few years, but they'll slowly try to creep it into us. As time goes on, they'll slowly creep in the idea of this being a necessity and it being something that we should be fine with as time progresses. I think the perfect example of this, if you guys remember back in like 2013 when the Xbox One X was announced, the CEO of Microsoft at the time came out and said that the Xbox One X would be a game console that you can only play online. You had to use it online, and there was going to be no way to, use pre-owned discs. You had to own everything digitally, or it was just a one-time use thing, and the disc was pretty much just a collector's item. You don't actually use it to play the games. And people were so mad about that initially, but let's fast forward to a decade later now, and that's kind of the industry standard now. The idea of like the discs we buy from video games, those discs barely have any data on them. They just have the license to play the game, and there are an increasing number of games that are single-player games that require an internet connection to play, that require you to be connected online to play. Suicide Squad's coming out. Perfect example of a game like that that's going to be like that in the future, right? And we're even being forced consoles that require, digital distribution and digital distribution platforms. Things like the Xbox Series S or the PS5 digital version, right? Consoles that, they give us the convenience of, well, you don't have to leave the house to go buy the game, and then people prefer to do that, and then they limit the supply of the physical discs, they stop manufacturing as much, forcing us to purchase digital media instead. That was something that people were afraid of because, that took away the ownership in a lot of cases, right? What happens when these servers shut down? I can't play the game anymore. What happens when my console bricks and I, have to find a new one? Or what happens when, PlayStation or Microsoft go out of business in like 30 years potentially, and then my PlayStation account's gone? Well, then I don't have the licenses to any of the games I bought. Stuff like that was a problem, and it's something that a lot of these companies force-fed us the idea of initially, and no one liked it, and then later on it progressed slowly. They kept implementing small changes until the point where it became the norm, and no one's really batting an eye to it because the shifts were so gradual and the changes were so quick, and it was all under the guise of convenience that the reality is kind of becoming the thing that people didn't want a decade ago. And I think that's going to be a similar situation with artificial intelligence in the future if, society doesn't regulate it in one way or another. You're going to have a lot of artificial intelligences creating animations, telling us stories, and giving us ideas, and assisting us with many aspects of life that we probably don't need assistance with at all. And it's kind of terrifying because right now you look at that and you think, I don't want that. People look at that awful anime rock, paper, scissors thing that was completely AI generated, and they're like, oh, that was bad. That's not good. I don't want that. They shit on it. So then what are they going to do? They're going to hide it for a little bit, and then they're going to introduce this new little cool gimmick that people like and slowly weave its way into society. They're slowly going to start making these things that we once enjoyed that were attached to humanity completely and utterly devoid of humanity. Once you start to commodify, autonomize the arts, you have to really wonder what the intent behind the arts are at that point, right? Because there's no empirically good guy in the ideas of capitalism nowadays, right? Like every single company that tries to sell us these ideas, they sell us the ideas to make a profit. They sell us things to make a profit, and that's the bottom line, no matter what. And usually there are the humans that act as the mediators in between to give us the messages that we really want to see, like directors of video games, of films, of, anime, writers, things like that. They're the personal touch, the talent that the big corporate suits hire to deliver certain messages and ideas of their own volition, of their own free will, right? And those ideas are completely untainted a lot of the time. There are some times where there's obvious propaganda or intent behind it, but most of the time we enjoy the media we like because it conveys a message that is relevant to us, that we can enjoy and empathize with. And the second that the AI starts to do that, the second that artificial intelligence starts to dip its nose into that sort of thing, you have to wonder who's behind the keyboard typing up the story prompts, or who's programming the AI and what their intent for that programming is, right? You have to start to wonder, once this becomes a commodity, Why are they selling us this commodity? What's the intent behind it? I'm having my first, in my 20s of all times, my first old man yells at cloud moments. There's only so much we can all do, right? Like, I'm just a guy in it with a microphone, so I can't really give you any sort of concrete answers or solutions to the problems, but I can give you my personal advice. We live in an age right now where it's so easy to spread misinformation, and it's so easy to misconstrue facts already as it is, just by posting something with, a vague clickbaity headline or title. It makes it very easy for people to become entrapped and outraged because they don't think first and they don't really look into the source later on. And that's going to become much harder to even distinguish now that we have deepfakes of, things that the few things that we thought were sacred. Things like, live video recordings and audio recordings. And that's becoming even harder to distinguish reality from fake. You really need to do research, not only look at facts, but understand the intent behind them. I think we live in a time period right now where facts are not enough to justify an argument. The facts are just the numbers. You have to understand the context behind these numbers. Who is giving me the numbers? Why are they giving me the numbers? If it's like a census, who did they conduct this study on? What's the sample size for it? What's the context behind this existing? Because regardless of whether or not you think a fact is a fact, a number is a number, a statistic is a statistic, those statistics are calculated, created, and devised by people with filters, intents, and motives. When someone gives you a fact and frames it a certain way, they do it with the intent of forming an argument toward you. And sometimes you can make a completely different argument with the same fact. That's my point overall. Devise your own arguments, think critically, and try to understand. You gotta just kind of think for yourself on it. Human beings can do pretty shitty things. In any case, yeah, video games, guys, right? Yeah. AI scares the ever-loving crap out of me. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Cool. Thanks. Bye.